Do you love ordering biscuits and gravy for breakfast? If you do, I'm gonna show you how to make them right at home. It is 100 times better. Hey everyone, I'm Dina from simplyhomecook.com, and today I'm gonna show you how to make biscuits and gravy. And it's all made from scratch, from the delicious sausage gravy to the buttermilk biscuits. They are so good. They're fluffy, buttery, and flaky. They're just incredible. All right, let's get right into the recipe. In a large bowl, add 2 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour, along with 5 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of granulated sugar, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Now grab a whisk and roughly mix that together. Now you want to cut up 3/4 cups of unsalted cold butter. And you want to make sure that the butter is extremely cold straight out of the fridge. That's really important for biscuits. And you just want to cut it into small cubes. Once the butter is all cut up, you just add it right into the flour mixture, and then you want to cut the butter into the flour. And for this step, I used a pastry cutter, but if you don't have a pastry cutter, you can honestly just use your clean hands. The reason why I try to avoid using my hands is because you want to keep the butter cold. And your hands are kind of warm, so it's gonna start melting down the butter, and we kind of want to avoid that. But that's okay. If it does get too melty, you can always just put it in the fridge to get it nice and cold again. Once the butter is cut down to about the size of a pea, that's when you want to add in 1 cup of cold buttermilk. Again, cold ingredients here are really important. Make sure that buttermilk is just straight out of the fridge. Now use a spatula to roughly mix everything together, and then you want to transfer it over onto your clean work surface. Now, using your hands, you want to form the dough into a rectangle shape. It doesn't really matter which size, as long as it's roughly like a rectangle. A rectangle. Once it's a rectangle, you want to use either a bench scraper or honestly a knife to cut it in half. And then you want to take 1/2 and then stack it on top. And then pat it back down into the same sized rectangle you did in the beginning. And then you want to cut it in half again, stack it again, and then flatten it out again. And then you want to stack it one more time. So you want to do a total of about 3 times. I mean, plus minus 1 times, it's not a big deal. The reason why we do this is because as you stack, you're creating layers. And all those flaky layers have like pockets of butter, so when it bakes up, all those pockets start to melt and it rises, and that's what makes a biscuit so amazing and delicious. Now, depending on how cold or warm your butter was or how warm your hands were, there's a chance that your butter might start to melt a little more than we want. I actually held it out too long. I was working with it too long and it started getting too soft, which you want to avoid because you won't have those nice flaky pockets of butter, and it won't make those big tall biscuits. So if at any point it gets a little too warm, you can always just put it in the fridge, let it firm up a little, and then continue that stacking process. Now once you shaped it for the last time, you want to kind of press it down and roll it out to a circle that's about 3/4 of an inch thick. Then use a round biscuit or cookie cutter to cut out the biscuits. And my cookie cutter was about 3 inches in diameter. Once you've got your biscuits all cut out, you want to transfer them to a baking sheet lined with some parchment paper. At this point, you'll have some scraps left over. Make sure not to throw those away. Just gather them back up with your hands and then roll it out to 3/4 inches thick again. And then you'll probably get maybe 2, maybe 3 more biscuits out of it, and just transfer those over to the baking sheet as well. Now at this point, you will need to put it in the freezer for about 15 minutes just to really firm up that butter that probably got a little too soft. And if you are not a big baker and you hate making a mess in your kitchen, but you love homemade buttermilk biscuits, I highly recommend to double this recipe, because the amazing thing about this biscuits recipe is that you can freeze them and bake them later. So at this point, this is where you would freeze them if you want to make them later. You would just put them on the parchment sheet, parchment lined baking sheet, freeze them until they're solid, and then whichever ones you want to save for later, just put it into a gallon-sized Ziploc bag, and it's good for months. And once you're ready to enjoy them, all you gotta do is take them, put it on a baking sheet, and bake it straight from the frozen form. And it's it's perfect, it's amazing, and your kitchen's clean. So that's just awesome. Now, while the biscuits are in the freezer, you want to preheat your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit, and you want to bake them for about 15 minutes or until they're golden brown. You want to heat your skillet to medium-high heat, and then you want to add the pork sausage. You'll want 1 pound of pork sausage, add it straight into the pan. You don't need any oil because there's plenty of fat in there. Now you want to use a wooden spoon just to mash everything and mix everything up until it's fully cooked. And at this point, you would add 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. The butter just adds more creaminess, more depth to the recipe. It's just something you don't want to skip. I know it's already fatty, but just trust me on this, it's good. Now go ahead and add 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour along with 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. And at this point, I don't add any salt. I always add salt at the very end because the pork sausage tends to be pretty salty, and you don't want to add salt early because then it's just going to be over-salted and it's not going to be good. So hold off on the salt. And the reason why I add flour is because it makes this sauce extra thick and creamy and delicious. Now you just want to mix the flour around just to get rid of that raw flour taste and let it kind of create a roux with the butter. Now at this point, you want to add 1 cup of chicken broth along with 2 cups of milk. And it doesn't matter if it's whole milk or 2%, any kind of milk works. Now at this point, the sausage gravy probably looks really liquidy. Don't worry, it's supposed to look like that. Once that milk and chicken broth come to a simmer, it's gonna activate the roux, which is gonna start thickening everything up. So be patient, trust me, it will thicken up. Now at this point, if you tasted it and it needs more salt, this is when you add the salt. Once it's salted to your liking, let it come to a simmer a little bit more for like 3 to 5 minutes, and it is done. Now you can enjoy your delicious warm gravy over those yummy buttermilk biscuits. And there you have it, guys. Now you know how to make biscuits and gravy right at home. You guys, this recipe is really amazing. I know I'm a little biased, but whenever we order breakfast, we always get biscuits and gravy. So we had our fair share, and I have to say, this is top notch. It is by far the best I've ever had. It is amazing. I hope you guys enjoyed this recipe, and if you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you guys get notified every time I come out with a new recipe. See you in the next video. Bye-bye. So good.